Hello and welcome everyone to today's event, exploring the shift from CPC to CPA, where our thought leadership panel of experts will provide their insights around transitioning from traditional job advertising to more performance-based models. If you are tuning in today to see Faith Rothberg, I hope I don't disappoint. I'm excited to fill in for Faith today, moderating today's panel. Proud to do so alongside our co-organizers and friends over at Jubal. My name is Brad Boggs. I'm the President and Chief Operating Officer of College Recruiter. We believe every student and recent grad deserves a great career, and it should be simple and cost-effective for employers to hire them. I want to welcome our online audience. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us. Whether you're an employer, you're working with a job board, ad agency, RPO, possibly another provider in the space, I do believe we'll provide you with some really valuable insight today that helps move the industry forward. But I want you to join and share in the conversation today. Please do like, share, add comments, ask questions as we're discussing. We'll get to some of those in real time, as well as carve out some time at the end of the event to answer some of those. Before we jump to my first question, I would like each of our panelists to introduce yourselves, if you would, please. I'm going to start with you, Yana, over at Jubal. Welcome.
Hi to everyone. Thanks for having me here today. Nice to see you all, the panelists and the audience, which is looking at us right now. I believe today we'll have a thrilling discussion about the experience of shifting from one model to another. And I'm sure that we will all share our experience in our companies that we faced already.
Fantastic. Thank you, Yana. And Roy, welcome from Appcast. Great to have you here.
Thanks, Brad. Hi, everyone. My name is Roy Jakes. I'm the European and UK Managing Director for Appcast. Appcast is a programmatic job advertising business. We are probably now the largest buyer of programmatic job ads in the world, and recently launched Appcast One, which is an omni-channel recruitment marketing solution for large employers.
Fantastic. Thanks for being here, Roy. And Corey joins us from Recruitix. Welcome, Corey.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Corey Kapner. I oversee our sales and partnerships here at Recruitix. Been here since inception. I currently live in the Netherlands, and we are the agency of record for very big brands. We focus on employer branding. We focus on programmatic advertising, and then we have a wonderful analytics platform that helps our clients track everything from external job sites and job boards and hiring platforms all the way to hire.
Thank you, Corey. Welcome. Appreciate you being here. And finally, Andy from Sonnet Jobs. Welcome.
Hi, everyone. I'm Andy Warby. I'm head of performance marketing at Sonic Jobs. We use AI, ML, RPA, lots of other acronyms, including CPA, to streamline the candidate application experience.
Fantastic. Thank you, Andy. Speaking of acronyms, Yana, I'm going to go to you first with the first question. Can you help us set the table for some of the terms we'll be discussing today? We'll be talking about traditional duration-based pricing models, cost per click, CPA for that acronym, CPC, cost per application or CPA, programmatic, some of these terms. Can you help us define those, Yana?
Yeah, sure. Actually, we've already listed a lot of things we are going to talk about today. And let's kick off what we all remember about the options which are now available in the market. So the first one, and the most ancient one, I believe, is a traditional duration-based model. It's a model which has its specific features. We can't say that it is good or bad. It's just appropriate for some types of profiles of clients and customers. Its features are like fixed prices, predictability about budgeting for the advertiser, and you can also count on how much you will spend, but you should also understand what is your final purpose. And talking about other, which is more developing now direction, is performance-based model. Here we can find multiple options in its multiple variations like CPC, CPA, CPA-based, CPQA. So everybody is doing their own things, but everything is about the performance, about the final value that the customer is going to have. And the features of these options, the common features, is increasing the rentability for the advertisers, is increasing the results in terms of real applications, and we are getting closer to the hire already. So these are all the things that that we must do remember and develop in this field. And talking about our experience in Jobble being job aggregator, actually we mostly work with CPC model, but we also offer our clients CPA models, apply and Jobble models. But I should mention that even when it is a CPC model, behind every model we offer to our clients, there is always a discussion about CPA target behind. Even the client is paying for every click, we want to understand what is his final aim, because I'm sure there are very few players on the market that are looking only just for empty clicks. They all want something. It may be subscription, applicant, or even apply start, but still we want to know that before we launch a campaign, because this is what a performance-based marketing is about.
Thank you, Jana. That's a great way to set the stage for today's conversation. You mentioned optimizing
Rob, can I maybe chip in at that point?
Yeah, Roy, please, open mic. Yeah, go ahead.
Thanks. I just also want to draw an additional distinction between pay for performance and programmatic.
Yep.
And I also want to emphasize clarity around what CPA is or can be. So over the years, we have worked with lots of job boards who've been on the journey from selling duration into selling performance. And so you'll hear CPA, cost per application, talked about a lot. And I would emphasize that you need to understand what sort of CPA it is that you're selling or buying. So when job boards talk about CPA, sometimes they're actually talking about cost per apply start. When organizations like Appcast or Recruitix talk about CPA, we're more often than not talking about cost per application when a completed application hits the ATS. Mm-hmm. And that's an important mathematical and funnel-based distinction. The other thing I would add is that pay for performance typically is the descriptor of the ad unit. So cost per something, cost per click, cost per apply start, cost per application, cost per quality application. And if you are buying in a linear fashion from a job board as a customer, you're going to buy something on a performance basis. But when you buy on a programmatic basis, you tend to be buying a marketplace. And the marketplace is typically a job ad exchange, a box of job boards, and you are layering technology and campaign rules and budgets to attract something from that marketplace at scale. And so I think as we're setting kind of the basis, I think there are two important distinctions.
Mm-hmm. Good points. Any other?
Sorry for jumping in.
Yeah, no, please. Any other comments? How about for job boards that aren't really set up or ready to sell CPC or CPA? Is there a recommendation for how they can sort of dip their toe in the water here to get started?
Yeah, there is. There are programmatic providers in the market who will be selling to employers, and you have several on the call here. But we will all provide feeds to job boards. So you can imagine, as well as the job board sales organization going out and talking to employers, if you're talking to partners like us, we will send job feeds into a job board. And a job feed is basically an XML feed of jobs that are coming through that they can display and monetize. And it's a very, very simple step from duration into the first realms of CPC.
Right. Okay. Fantastic. So Roy, I'm going to stay with you for a second then. When is it better to advertise using something like a traditional model versus CPC or CPA-based pricing?
It's a good question. Performance will work for most companies and most job types, but I wouldn't always advocate it. I think if you've got very small job ad volumes, you're probably better with duration. You've got 5 or 6 jobs. When you're doing performance, there is often a setup process that requires pixels and ATS tracking. So if you've got no ATS, go and buy duration. If you've got senior roles and you've typically used job boards to advertise 3 or 4 senior roles, go and use duration. And if you're working in a really niche industry, there are niche job boards that serve small communities. You're probably better off buying duration in those instances. However, on the other end of the scale, if you are hiring at volume, hiring at scale, hiring internationally, hiring on an evergreen basis, you probably want to look at performance.
Right. Okay. Corey, I'm going to come to you with the next question before we move on. Any follow-up to what Roy just touched on? Yeah.
I would just definitely like to add to the idea to whom the traditional duration-based model is more appropriate. I completely agree about the number of jobs which you have to sponsor. So when you have few, that is better to use the duration-based model. But also there is a important thing about the brand of the employer. If you are a well-known brand, then this model can work for you because the brand will work for you and the user will just, even when your job is on somewhere on the 20th position in search results, the user will definitely click on it because he knows that what is McDonald's about or something like this. But if you're just like a startup or just very, very unknown brand, probably some performance-based marketing campaign will be much better for you.
Good point. Okay, Corey, I'm going to come to you now. We've touched on CPC and CPA. What matters are most important when using a CPA model, both from the advertiser and the job board perspective? What are some of the considerations there?
Yeah, there's really four, but the easiest one is quality. And everyone has a different definition of quality. And my normal is not your normal. And even though we use the same language, we all have different definitions. So depending on the ATS integrations, depending if job boards are doing click to offsite where they're applying on the ATS and you're losing the traffic, quality will always come into play along with cost. So that's the first one. The three others are all about transparency as the through line. Transparency between click cost and then the actual CPA cost. So a lot of our clients, a lot of the more educated buyers out there, they're actually already doing CPC or PPC. And when we want to shift to a CPA model, because they're used to working with vendors and job boards directly, they understand that companies need to make money off the spread, meaning acquiring for one and then selling for another. But they also want to know, well, what was the original cost and how can they gain those efficiencies? The second piece to transparency is really about the source and where the traffic is actually coming from. A lot of job boards, a lot of job aggregators, a lot of job sites talk about their publisher networks, where they're advertising and how they're going across thousands of job sites around the world. The 80-20 rule is, quite relevant here, where 80% of media spend typically goes to 20% of the vendors that can drive the volume and quality that people are actually looking for. And the last part about transparency is around the third party or general labor market data. Why is that cost set at that specific price, right? Where in the US, a data analyst in San Francisco, California, should have a different CPA than Miami, Florida, and people want to know why and what does that supply and demand really look like. So to sum up, three pieces of transparency, and then quality would be the underlying through line, as for sure.
Great, thanks, Corey. Any other considerations from the panel or follow-up thoughts on that?
Probably just one small comment from me that in addition to this transparency idea, which I completely support and which Jubal supports as well, because like transparency is the key to success when we have enough feedback, when we have enough data to make decisions. But just to mention about the technical side of things, when you're working on CPA model, you should be prepared technically. You should be able to share the data most probably in an automatic way with your partner, with your traffic supplier. So this is the way how your traffic supplier can increase your performance level. And this is actually very important to mind before switching to CPA model.
So data sharing as far as either the clicks that started the application or completed the application. So there's a feedback loop. Is that what we're talking about with data sharing?
Yeah, exactly. Actually, if we want to provide a specific, if the client want to have a specific CPA price for such a job, we should understand what type of users usually can generate this conversion, this target action. And without making and having the full customer journey in one place, we can't understand what optimization we should do in order to get desired results. So just when we have data on our end in terms of traffic, what we acquire, and the way how it performs on client's end, this might be put in common to be able to analyze the flow and optimize it actually.
Okay. So before we move to the next question, Andy, I'm going to go to you with that. Corey, follow-up question from the audience. Can you dive a little bit deeper into quality, or explain the quality component again? What are we talking about in terms of quality?
Yeah, quality, it's a subjective term, which is tough for the audience members. It's tough for vendors. It's tough for anyone really inside the ecosystem, because that's how we're all being measured. And so what we try to do for our clients is we try to create a standardization of what quality means to them. And so typically, if you have an applicant tracking system integration, or a candidate relationship management integration, or a human capital management system integration, in other words, a third-party platform that they're using to manage the candidates and the flow and the notes and the feedback, we try to understand what quality really means to them. So for a staffing agency or a recruitment agency out in the world, does quality mean a placement for sure? Or does it mean someone that's good for their database that they've acquired from a job board or a job aggregator that they can use later down the road to make money, right? That would be deemed as a quality applicant. And same thing with direct employers or the corporates of the world, where is it someone a good fit for the job, or is it someone that could be a good fit later down the road? And so for us, we try to understand what the funnel looks like, and we try to agree on, is a first round interview a quality candidate? Is it the second round interview a quality candidate? For high volume roles, do they go to work immediately? And so because it's subjective, it's really tough to nail down. That's why the consultants from the job boards and job aggregators that work with the clients directly should really try to understand what those down funnel metrics look like. And the way that we operate is we install JavaScript or pixels where it fires based on those standardized events. So we take this unstructured world and we try to bring structure to it. That way we can hold each other accountable, where we know how many quality candidates we're delivering, and then we know how many quality candidates that they're actually receiving. And so we match up those reports, and we make sure that both parties are marching towards the same goal and we're on the same wavelength.
Great. Thanks, Corey. Really helpful. Getting some fantastic comments around quality.
Corey.
Go ahead, Roy.
Yeah, I'm with you 100%. I can see comments and questions coming through about the future, and is it possible to track sourcifier and measure CPH? That future's here already. Several of us on the call can do this today. So it's just a matter of having that conversation. But I'm with you 100% on quality. It is subjective, and it is unique to each individual employer, how and where in their funnel they want to measure it. And they need to be able to optimize to that point and have the right internal rigor combined with the measurement technology, so that we can see like what is from the click, how many actually make it through to being a quality applicant and to a hire.
Right.
So the tech is here today.
Great. Well, it sounds like we could continue talking about quality for quite a while. We're going to move on to Andy. What are some of the changes that must be implemented in order to buy or sell on a CPA basis specifically? We're talking about kind of in the weeds things, everything from billing, tracking, data sharing. Can you unpack some of this for us?
Yeah, I mean, you pretty much covered it there. The obvious one is tracking, right? If I'm going to pay you for an application, or I'm going to get paid based on an application, we need to have an agreement that you sent the application and I'm going to pay you this much. So you need that transparency. You need the tracking in place between you, whether that's through Appcast Pixel, you kind of go and set up your own bespoke tracking pixel, or through an API response. But at the most basic level, yeah, you need to be on the same page when it comes to, we sent you this and we received that. Those numbers have to align. And really what that means is that any CPA pricing model has to be based on transparency. And I think Corey was bang on when he said transparency was one of the most important things, because any buying relationship that moves to CPA becomes much more collaborative, because I have to pass you the fairest CPA, you have to pass me high quality candidates, there has to be an interchange, we have to discuss the fairness of that relationship, because if I'm paying you $1 for an application, that's going to be a very different role than if I'm paying $250, and we need to make sure that we're being fair and transparent in our pricing, and agreeing with our tracking and our data sharing.
Any follow-up thoughts on changes that must be implemented to move to this model?
Yeah, actually a couple of ideas to add. Talking about transparency, these ideas were already announced today, that we need to get prepared both when buying and selling. We need to get prepared for the pricing and for the idea of which prices we should define for what kind of jobs. I mean that both advertiser and publisher should probably have a kind of marketing research to understand on their own end, for example, how Corey mentioned today, how much each position should cost in different cities, in different countries, and depending on the level of the position, the seniority of the position, so on and so on. This is because sometimes when switching too fast to the CPA model, not everybody is accountable of what price is fair for this market, for this current condition, and even for this period of the year. So this is something which we should get prepared for. And also just want to share one of the challenges that Drupal has already when switching to CPA model is that we need to adjust our internal system for transforming CPC values into CPA values when preparing the bills, actually, because inside our system everything is being calculated and the ranking is being made based on the CPCs. But when we are selling on CPA basis, we need to understand and sometimes to make some predictions how many clicks on which price we need to provide a CPA to a client for a particular price. So this is a challenge that is very dependent on multiple things like traffic of sources we're using and even Google algorithms which are being launched. So everything influences this, and this is really a challenge how to avoid risks for both sides, because we might be fear that when someone is coming to us to buy on CPA model, there is the risk which is being passed to us, because we now need to handle the risk of delivering unrelevant users and visitors to the site.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the advertiser doesn't have to pay for that. Yeah, Roy, please.
Yeah, you touched on something so important, and I'm going to emphasize this for anyone that is in the audience that is working for a job board right now. When you sell duration advertising today, you get your money at the point of sale. When you sell CPC or CPAS or CPA, you need traffic to deliver against it. So Jonas talking there about balancing the risk of selling something to a customer and offsetting the traffic cost, making sure that they can balance the books. You need the traffic to make your performance model a success. And so part of the art of this transition, if you're a job board making a transition, part of the art of this transition is saying, I can sell something here. Can I bring the traffic from this point in order that I make money and make positive margin? You've got to balance the books.
Yeah, that's true.
Andy, did you have a hand up?
Yeah, I mean, CPC and CPA, they're two sides of the same coin, right? As you said, the risk is whoever is selling, if you're selling CPA, you're taking the risk. If I'm buying CPC, I'm taking the risk, because the application is what matters at the end of the day. And with CPA, obviously the temptation is that to try and get that, you want your conversion rate to be as high as possible. So as few clicks as you need to have will go and convert and make the application that you can sell. But the point is that it still comes down to the quality of that application at the end of the day.
Right. Corey, did you want to jump in here?
I just fear for the future when it comes to quality, because we all have friends within the industry and they're all posting about the AI capabilities. And I volunteer career coach for the New York Public Library for the last 8 years. And I speak to job seekers from all walks of life. And I tell you, this stuff is going viral. And if you're billing based on a CPA basis, and people can apply to thousands of jobs with a click of a button, we're, as an industry, going to hit a crossroad. And so I want to be very cognizant of what's happening right now. Only 20% of people use ChatGPT when I talk to them, right? Out of 10 people I coach, only 2 know about it. That number is going to drastically change, just like iPhones and just like early adopters, right? It takes a little bit. Once everyone has the same types of technology to apply, and the ATSs and the CRMs and the HCMs and the job boards or job aggregators, they don't have the technology on the back end to adjust, quality will be a whole nother term that we all define. And so I'm just expressing my fear about the future within the 1, 3, 5 year mark around what quality means to people.
Good point. I'm surprised we made it 25 minutes before AI making its first appearance. That's probably a record in 2023. So let's Jana, I'm going to come back to you here. We've touched on this a little bit, but let's talk about some of the pros and cons, focusing on the advertiser, the one doing the hiring, trying to drive candidates and applicants. For advertisers considering making this switch from traditional duration basis to CPC, possibly CPA, what are some of the pros and cons we're talking about here?
Yeah, besides what we mentioned already, I should start with a statement that you, before making a decision to switch to it, you should understand if you really have an appropriate client profile that will benefit from this transition on your end. I mean that you should understand what type of clients you and customers you have, and what is the demand. If their demand is like applications, then sure thing, you should think about it and you should get prepared for this. And when talking about advantages and disadvantages, let's begin with advantages. For sure, we've already touched this topic. It's a reduction of costs. Sure thing, you when you switch to performance-based model, especially to CPA, you don't need anymore to pay for irrelevant users coming to your website. You may still have them, you may still have traffic to your website, but you don't have to pay for that, except for using like smart reply options, which are now being offered by multiple players in the market. And then the same thing, transferring the risk. It's all about this, and it's also about more predictability in terms of budgeting and in terms of your relations with your end client. When you're an advertiser, you know, for example, how much higher costs and how much what is the hiring cost of each candidate. Then you can plan more strictly what price for just resume you need to pay to get this hire happen. And from my point of view, for an advertiser, it becomes less management from their side, because they just give the jobs, give the target and the CPA they want to pay. And here is it. All the other things to do are like your publisher pains. They need to adjust their traffic to your needs and so on and so on. And actually, when talking about cons, I should also remind here that CPA model, performance model, is not only about the way of billing. It's also about some tech preparation for this. So you need to understand like the things we mentioned already. It must be tracking, it must be transparency, not only from the side of publisher, but also from an advertiser. If the advertiser is interested in getting good result, I believe the advertiser should help the publisher deliver it, at least by feedback. And also there is a risk of less reach. I mean that when publisher is concentrated on delivering candidates only, this publisher may have reduced amount of traffic channels to use for this type of campaign. And also there is a risk, for example, if the client, the advertiser is interested in receiving significant traffic volumes for their websites just for SEO performance themes, there is a risk here, because when concentrating on CPA model, like we as a publisher, for example, we do not think about delivering volumes of empty clicks to the client site just to support the number of visits on their site, because it's not something we are going to be paid for. But actually, making an assumption about these pros and cons, I believe that if your organizational structure allows it, it's better probably to use hybrid models depending on the demand of the client, and to communicate directly with each one what are the personal aims of this customer, and depending on this, suggest an appropriate pricing model and appropriate traffic flow model, because for some it may be even like smart apply options. I know that Sonic Jobs is someone who is really specified on this, so it depends. But
I'm going to go open mic for a second. We're going to take this LinkedIn user's question talking about how much more expensive on average are CPAs today versus older CPAs. I'm guessing this is effective cost per application you're achieving through a CPC campaign. Can you speak to the differences in cost? Anyone?
I don't think they should be any different. I think if you should know what an application is worth to you. And on a CPC model, I would expect most people are setting those CPCs based on an expected conversion rate and how much the application is worth. So I think the only difference for me is that buying on CPA just should give you more stability. With CPC, you're always somewhat hedging, and that means, yes, some days you have a great day where your CPA is lower, you win. Other days, maybe you miss out because you say your CPC is too low, you don't get the traffic, you don't get the clicks, don't get the applications, and you miss out. But CPA is always there, and it should always be fair. That's a good little slogan, that, isn't it?
That is nice. Good thing we're recording this.
Just to add that the thing that Andy just mentioned, that when one day on CPC basis, one day you can have a really cheap conversion and other day very expensive. And at the same time, it is advantage and disadvantage, because when you have a fixed CPA price, you don't have this chance to get cheaper conversion, even if your publisher managed to do so. So you should also balance among these what you want more, stability, or maybe take some risk and see what it brings to you.
Roy, did you have something?
There's a market supply. There's a market supply and demand issue here as well. You know, we're talking in a fairly linear fashion about an individual entity providing job ads at a fixed CPA and judging whether that CPA is fair and whether that CPA is more or less than a prior period. But from where we sit on a programmatic basis, CPAs in the UK, for example, have come down this year. You know, the unemployment is going up. Number of job ads is decreasing. There is more traffic available in the market. Costs are coming down, and so there's a genuine market dynamic here where what happens in the macro economy affects pricing. And if you're working on a programmatic basis across multiple different vendors, then not only is the bid or the price at which the employer willing to pay going to change, but the marketability of all the different providers that partake in that exchange also changes. And I think we've just seen that. You know, Jan has just sort of demonstrated why that's a good and a bad thing. So I think this notion of CPAs at a market level being fixed is not the right view of the entire market. CPAs will fluctuate depending on what happens with market and trading conditions. And it's important to understand that, especially as an employer, if you are entering into campaigns or doing budget setting for a forthcoming period, there is some variability in the market.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Roy. And, you know, there's so many different variables. So I used to work at Indeed in the very, very beginning, and we were selling campaigns to companies like Aerotech or Allegis Group, which are major staffing agencies, for like $500 a month. And that was a big deal. Inflation is real. And so to Roy's point around the macroeconomic and geopolitical situations, for sure, that has to be taken into account. And I'd argue that a fixed CPA is dangerous because, in theory, because we have the ability to look at job level analytics and what the conversion rate and the application rate looks like for each category, specialty, location, industry, there should be, in theory, a different CPA goal for each one of those categories, and then managing the expectations of your performance marketing team or your external client base to help partner in a way to manage those expectations. Because for direct employers, it's simple back of the napkin math, yet probably 10% are already there, where how many hires do you need? How many applicants does it take to get to that hire? What is the average cost of that person? And then what is the average conversion rate and application rate of that job? Those are 4 back of the napkin variables that everyone in theory should be able to pull out of their systems, and yet only 10% have that ability. And so those are the types of conversations all of us should be having with whoever is paying for that traffic, because to Roy's point, it does change. It changes week by week. It changes month by month. It changes by quarter, it changes day by day. I mean, we've been in this industry for quite some time where Monday, Tuesday, Wednesdays have higher traffic days than Saturday and Sunday. Once we hit the American Thanksgiving, November 25th, November 26th, all the way through the holidays, it dies. And then all of a sudden, January, everyone's bidding against one another. And so those variables are really important to take into account as you're structuring the budgets and as you're structuring the relationships of what success looks like.
Corey, you touched on.
There's one significant.
No, please, Roy, go ahead.
I was going to say there's one significant thing on the employer side, and what do you do in terms of creating an application flow through your ATS impacts your CPA price. If you have a long process, be ready for lower conversion rates and higher CPAs. If you've got a super slick process, be prepared for high conversions and lower CPAs. So it's not just about market dynamics. It is in part about what you do and what you choose to do in your recruiting funnel.
Roy, I'm going to stay with you for a second. Let's talk about the education component for job boards and other vendors in the market that are moving towards, maybe even requiring customers to switch from duration traditional models to performance-based models. How should they be educating their customers to help ensure a smooth transition? And do employers know their CPAs? How much do we have to be educating here?
A lot. So that's maybe not a fair comment. It depends which market you're in and how advanced the adoption of performance marketing is in that given geo. 6 years ago when I joined Appcast in the UK, pay for performance and programmatic was not terrifically well known. And whilst many were buying on a CPC basis from Indeed, the true metrics of what they were doing weren't fully understood. So I think the market you're in initially dictates the level of education that's required. Whether on the customer side, a customer has had experience buying performance or programmatic. From a job board perspective, when you are, or a provider perspective, when you're selling to that employer, I think we need to recognize that it's a change. That they've probably been buying duration job advertising for 20 years. They're comfortable with it. They know it. It's the fixed repeating budget that happens every year. And what we're advocating here is a change to the way that they think about their advertising, to the control they've got over their advertising, the flexibility that they have during the year, and the usability of their budget. And by that I mean basically using rules to fill more roles than they may have done under duration. So we're asking them to make a change, and I think it's only fair to the customer that we are really crisp about what is it that we sell, how it works, what our contract terms are, and what pricing is likely to mean. And you said it a moment ago, if you're selling CPA, how does the customer know the right CPA? Well, often they won't. If you ask the question, in your recruitment funnel, do you know what you pay for an application? A very small percentage will today. And so that means we need the wisdom of other customer situations or the wisdom of benchmark data to initiate campaigns for them and then test the market to see where the actual price is. And I think the other thing about performance advertising, and this is a really good thing for the provider and the customer, is you get to work more closely together. Because performance can be responsive to changing customer needs, understanding those needs and how they might change week on week, day on day, year on year, month on month, whatever the time period is that's pertinent to them. You get to drive a closer relationship and really understand what is it that the customer is trying to achieve. And I think imparting that communication cycle at the start of the sales process, and certainly the start of the account management process, is really, really important. And then the thing that they're going to get, which is mind-blowing to a lot, is the full metrics funnel. When we are talking to customers that are newly moving into performance, and the aforementioned scenario where they don't have all those metrics to hand, suddenly they have them all. Like, what does it all mean? How do I understand this? I've got data now. How do I use this data to do better? How do I use this data internally? So you can help the customer on that journey as well. So
follow-up question, Roy, for you. You can take this one first. How flexible is the CPA budget or the actual CPA that you're locked into? Can that change along the life of the campaign?
It depends. It depends what media you're buying and who you're buying it from. So if you're buying a CPA from a job site on a fixed price basis, then they may promise that they can keep that CPA fixed for a period of time. If you're buying CPA on a programmatic basis, then that's going to shift and change with the market, and any vendor should be able to guide you on what those, what the variance is in that and what that means for your budget in terms of, it's maths, it's just all maths, like how many hires you need, how many applications you need, the variability in price.
Follow-up comments on that or this discussion? Yeah, please.
Yeah, I actually wanted to support Roy's idea about the way how we should educate our customers, our partners to treat data, to work with it. This is like very important component that we as traffic suppliers should provide, is teaching our clients how to convert knowledge into action. We should help them understand what all these numbers mean, why we have in particular these numbers, and how we can convert or change them closer to their expectations and their needs in terms of their businesses. And there is like in JobelWeb, it's been almost 2 years since we've had internal transformation of the team, and we've got customer success team, which is completely devoted to supporting all the customers' requests. And in this transitional period, it is highly needed to have a person, to have maybe a team, not even one person, who will support you from different perspectives, like technical side, billing process, like operational work of setting up campaigns, so on and so other.
Corey or Andy, education with customers based on geo markets, based on customer type. How much education is needed right now?
A lot of education. And again, education means a lot of things to different people. So are we dealing with talent acquisition? Are we dealing with recruitment marketing? Are we dealing with recruitment advertising? Are we dealing with HR? And that's from the corporate side. Staffing is marketing and operations, and sometimes the C-level that have built their businesses, especially in the UK, as former salespeople, pounding the phones and going through the ranks. And that's how they know what is successful. And there's a lot of gut and emotional feelings tied to it. Education is something that personally is exciting, because you're creating the category, right? That's what happened with programmatic advertising in the very beginning. You created that category. Now look how many programmatic vendors we have. And so we're moving the industry forward by educating. Something that I do want to go back to very quickly around the fluctuation of the CPA and can you change it? Roy hit on it a bit, and it's one of those things where it's based on the opportunity costs of where that company is in their life cycle. So for example, if there's a new job board, and these job boards have 3 major goals. 1 is to retain their largest client base. 2 is turn their free trials or pilots into long-term contracts. And 3 is to register new users to the ecosystem. If Amazon or Uber, any of these big companies with massive budgets come into the sales pipeline, I'm led to believe, because I've seen it in real time, that that job board will sacrifice and go in the red on purpose for months at a time to retain that customer, and then help renegotiate. And once they sign, then it goes through the performance marketing channels to make sure that there's good revenue tied to it, and there's good EBITDA and like all the things that we all look at from a P&L perspective. And so I've seen a lot of companies sacrifice 90 days at a time to make sure that they retain those customers. So those negotiations happen on a weekly, monthly, and quarterly basis for sure.
Good point, Corey. Andy, anything to add here before we move on?
Yeah, I think it's touched on in the comments, but when you get full transparency, you've got to be prepared for what you see.
Good point. And thank you to our audience. Keep the questions coming. Fantastic conversation. Corey, I'm going to come back to you. Let's look ahead a bit now. This came up earlier in the conversation, but let's talk a little more on cost per quality application. Is that going to become the standard as opposed to CPA like we're talking about now, or even other models down the road? Will we still see CPC, CPA as viable options?
It's proven that CPC, CPA can coexist. Duration postings are not going away. Slot postings are not going away. Credits are not going away. And I admire the job boards that have stuck to their guns throughout the Indeed and PPC revolution the last decade, right? And as you go east across Europe, those job postings are so expensive, and I'm still amazed to see it, and people are still paying for it. And I don't think we're ever going to leave that. To me, I think all roads lead to two areas. One is staffing, right? I think all roads lead to staffing. And so, yes, we can deliver candidates, and then there'll be a point where all these matching technologies and all of these sourcers need help. And so there's pre-screening, and we developed those solutions out of COVID because we were stacking application on application, and our clients are saying, wait a minute, well, we need help screening. And so creating a tech-enabled staffing agency by providing a short list, that's a form of quality applicants being delivered at a good price for people. CPQA, I don't think we're ever going to have a standard, air quotes there, because there are too many applicant tracking systems, there are too many CRMs, and there are too many HCMs, or human capital management systems, that have the different application processes. To Roy's point earlier, if you have 45 minutes and an assessment to go through an application, the cost is going to be extremely high. If you have a quick apply process and you can do first name, last name, resume upload, or CV upload, that's going to be very low. And so no one will be able to agree what a quality applicant looks like. And so will it be a metric that people will be measured on? For sure. Will it be an offering for some subscription models or some job boards that are trying to innovate? For sure. But I think that we're all going to see the duration, the credits, the slots, all of it coexist with one another. And then there'll be options for customers to choose what they feel most comfortable with.
You all see the question below too. Anyone want to take this one?
Well, actually, probably since I was mentioning this topic many times today, I can start. Probably Roy will help me later. Actually, if we're talking about tracking for CPA campaigns, it's completely the same thing as for CPC campaign as well. We need to have an automatic way of sharing data, and it should be like the best way is server-to-server data that we can receive once the target action happens. I'm telling the target action as it may be a subscription, submitted application, start apply, whatever you are calculating on your end. We as traffic suppliers need to have on our end a notice about to understand whether we performed well or not. And from the technical side of things, nowadays there are multiple options for that. For these, there are options which involve some technical specialists to install. There are also options like Google Tag Manager when you don't need to be a tech professional to set it up, and and this is all needed when we're talking about the option when the user is getting redirected from the supplier's side to the side of the client. This is the case when we need this, because when the flow is happening in-house, I mean, let's imagine that the application is happening on Jubal, then we don't need any tracking because we know already when it happened. But in all the other cases, this is definitely something we need. And Roy, I'm sure, completely shares this idea. I know in Upcast, it's also a challenge to have the tracking coverage.
Yeah, I mean, our whole system works with tracking into the tech stack. So I know there are various ways of doing it, and it's unique to each customer how that actually gets done, but there are common threads depending on your ATS or your CRM. But I'd like to just go back to this like notion of cost per quality application. I think when you consider the funnel, and in that funnel you are moving to a cost per hire, there are stages before that. So cost per hire or the hire is the ultimate thing that we're trying to achieve. Cost per quality application, cost per application, cost per apply start, cost per click. It's just maths. Interestingly, with quality, once you have denoted as an employer what quality means to you and given it a measurable point in your process, so might be first interview, second interview, psychometric test, whatever it is, then you can use that to aid your buying. So we were talking earlier about dynamic pricing in the market and dynamic CPA. Knowing what publishers deliver applications and therefore a CPA is fantastic. But knowing which publishers deliver quality helps buy better media to drive better quality. And that tech is here today. So this notion of cost per quality application as the billing metric is really interesting. But actually you can achieve that mathematically on a cost per application basis by measuring that point of quality in the funnel. And I know that because we do it today.
Interesting. Any follow-up on the tracking downstream for an employer, making this easier for them, or touching on the quality component before we take the next question? Okay.
It is a loaded term.
We had a follow-up question coming in, I think specifically for Corey. Here we go.
Yep. So great question. And it depends on who you are. And what I mean by that, for direct employers and staffing, I came across a company at a conference called Tadio. And it's an assessment or an engagement platform, depending on how you define it. And what they do, I'll make it really easy. Take a picker packer, a warehouse worker. Someone applies, but before the completed apply, they go through a virtual simulation of what it's like to scan all the boxes, or they actually use a forklift to pick up the boxes and put it into the warehouse, right? And so it's testing the job seeker to make sure that they can do the job. And what they claim, which I believe, quality goes through the roof, conversion rate, we had a healthy debate because we want to know what that really means to them. But the attitude that text is going to be the main source, I think is, rose-colored lenses here. I think video and gamifying the application process is the future, right? And so to create a new revenue stream to help qualify these candidates for your customers, I think is really strong, because these technologies are going to be quite aggressive in making the job seeker apply everywhere, right? And we've had that in the past. The only way to defend it is to make sure that you're putting a step in between, which will kill conversion rates and, hurt on cost. But for a direct employer staffing agency, that's their only way to play defense. And so if I'm a direct employer and I'm working with Appcast or Recruitix, and they're like, okay, well, I have to install tracking on my ATS or on my third-party platform, I'm going to make sure that that triggers or that fires the conversion after the assessment. So I'm only paying for the most qualified people, and I'll sacrifice volume any day for quality. And so I'm like creating a safety net there. Hope that answers the question.
Anyone else want to touch on that before we take the next one? AI.
I think it's a really interesting suggestion there from Corey around the idea of this like qualifying step. I think we just have to be mindful that we're still making sure that the application flow is accessible for everyone. And with candidates who are maybe less tech savvy, we need to make sure that it's still available to them, and that whatever solution we put in place to combat AI, it doesn't impact real candidates.
Okay, we have a question coming in about high volume hiring. Can you give estimated differences in cost when you're targeting speed and volume versus contained applications and quality? We'll go around the horn here. Corey, do you want to start with this one?
The cost in theory should be much lower and the volume should be much higher. And given the macroeconomic changes over the last couple of years, many HR tech vendors have pivoted to the high volume space. And so that has created a lot of spam across a lot of websites and a lot of job creation services there. And so geography has a lot to do with it, because the rural areas of any state, province, what have you, or like the rural areas of each country, the cost is going to be much higher. And the employer brand has a lot to do with it too, because Amazon is known to burn and churn through employees on purpose, part of their culture. And then companies like Chewy, right, they set up their warehouse right next to Amazon warehouses because they pride themselves in retention and internal mobility. And so those costs will differ based off of the employer brand, the job description, salary and benefits, because for some places that's super hot, if there's air conditioning in a warehouse, well, that cost is going to go way, way down because people want to work in an air conditioned place, whereas other warehouses are not air conditioned. And so there's so many variables that tie to it. Traditionally speaking, speed and volume go hand in hand with low cost and high volume for these types of roles, and the CPA tied to it.
Thanks, Corey. So we have 3 minutes left. I'm going to ask the three remaining to take a minute each, if you would, on this or any other thoughts as we wrap up. Jana, I'm going to come to you next.
So which question should I answer?
You can touch on final thoughts, anything we touched on today, or that last question we saw on screen, speed versus quality.
I see. Okay. So probably let's start summing up what we discussed today. I believe that this is a common point for all of us, that we are not going to see any of the pricing models to disappear in the nearest future. There is demand for all of them, and there is a specific need for some niche needs for different types of clients. So we can't say that something will disappear, something will become dominant, but still from our point of view and from the experience of the companies we are working in, we see that there is a demand from the customers to have more transparency on the candidates flow, and to have more value in terms of real target action. And sure thing, that is the most desired thing is hire. So they would like to be built per hire, but we should be honest that it is very subjective, and we need to cope with that in order to balance between what we can offer and what the client and what we can all measure together in order to perform well.
Thank you. Roy, final thoughts in a minute?
Yeah, I just want to go back to this volume-based notion. In very simple terms, fast apply flows and easy apply flows for volume-based roles will garner cheaper CPAs. More complex supply flows will garner more expensive CPAs. But if CPA is your only measurable metric in that whole process, then you're probably going to get a surprise. Because what you're effectively doing is choosing where the effort and cost is in the entire recruitment process. So in a tough market, you can make your apply process really slick to get the volume you need, to get the engagement that you need from the candidate, and then engage with them and take them through probably a higher cost post-application process. In a very open market with high candidate flow, you might want to create a tiny bit more form friction to reduce application and focus more on quality. So whilst I'm absolutely a performance and programmatic advocate, I think you have to think about your entire attraction funnel and the costs and the effort and where that goes. And so my parting shot is this: what's right for the customer is typically right for the provider. And I think programmatic or performance advertising is right for the customer.
Thank you, Roy. Andy, can you bring us home?
Yeah, I think Roy's right about we need some friction. CPA, CPC, it doesn't really matter. What matters is the hire at the end and getting the right candidate for that job. So removing as much bad friction, the redirection, the poor, horrible application flow, but making sure that if someone wants to be a truck driver, they have actually got a trucking license. We have to add those steps in, because otherwise, one-click apply would be lovely, but you're still going to get probably the same number of applications. You'll just pay for an awful lot more rubbish.
Fantastic. Thank you, Andy. I want to thank our co-organizers today from Jubal. Jana, appreciate you joining. Roy from Appcast, Corey from Recruitix, Andy from Sonic Jobs. thank you all for sharing your time, your knowledge, and experience with us as we unpack some of this. I want to thank our attendees for joining. Feel free, I'm sure, to reach any of us on LinkedIn or otherwise to learn more about how we can help your organizations in this transition from traditional to performance-based models. There's a lot to cover here, and I'm sure we'd be happy to coordinate with you to drive better hiring outcomes. Thanks for joining. See you next time.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.